Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Welcome to the Fly With Us podcast. This podcast is bringing the art of conversation, self love, self care, mental health care and protection, life lessons, love lessons, and everything in between. Today, we're going to talk about Black mental health awareness. I'm Lady Bounce.
And I am Picket Fence.
So, Sir Pickett, you have the mindfulness menu for this episode.
Yes, I do. It's called Deep Breathing in Emotional States. When I feel afflicted emotions, I practice deep breathing to bring myself into calm. I can learn to modulate my own emotions through breathing and mindfulness. The emotions often Our emotions often over-respond to crisis, amping up the feeling of stress and anxiety. Instead of directing focus towards the external threat, the stress response attacks the body itself, leading to reduced sleep and increased inflammation. Meditation offers a drug-free way to decrease negative emotions and begin to control your breath. It's very important in tense situations to increase the length of the breath, to take complete inhalation and exhalation. This sends the all is well signal to the brain, so it slows down the production of stress and hormones. Each time when you sit down to meditate, focus on breathing. Sit up as straight as possible, then breathe into the three areas: the stomach, the side ribs, and the chest. Even if you don't count the breath, focus on expanding these three areas. You will also note that this deeper breathing supports good posture and through the lungs pushes up the spine and the chest. Word up.
Word up. So we have joining us today a very special guest. He is a psychotherapist, an artist, an author, and a walking Black mental health awareness advocate. Welcome to the show, Mr. David Archer.
Hello. Welcome. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm just pleasured to meet with both of you, and also honored, and also hopefully we can have a nice and mindful conversation with each other that just helps people to just get in touch with their inner awesomeness, and also helps them to feel a bit better about themselves.
Word. So let's jump into it. Tell us a little about your practice.
Sure. What would you like to know?
Well, you offer a lot of different services, so let's start with some of the different services that you offer.
Yeah, sure. So the thing is that I'm what you would call a person who works with individuals who've been affected by trauma. And so my specialization is more for racial trauma. I'm very interested in the idea that a person's identity and just the way how they look is going to impact what it is that takes place or what happens to them. It's kind of that many people are affected by the outside view of them, and this affects their internal view of themselves. And so when we are able to make it so that what has taken place in the past, what is taking place in the present, is not as dominant in terms of the way how it affects a person's identity of how they see themselves, then awesome things can happen. I noticed that like Black people are more likely to talk about racial forms of trauma. Women are more likely to talk about gendered forms of trauma. And when we are able to reprocess and heal from these things, it allows us to more fully be the person we are meant to be, instead of being the person who is typically seen in the social structure as being a Black person, or what it socially means to be a woman, or any other form of identity. We're more free to be, I feel like we're destined to be. I think that if I can speak a bit about Black meditation too, I hope I'm not jumping to questions. You asked me one question.
Go ahead.
My job is actually to listen to people talk. So anytime someone gives me the microphone, then it's time for me to go off. So the thing is that I was just interested in the fact that many of us as Black people, we've heard a lot about what it means to be Black from the outside, and I think in terms of our healing as a community and as a people, it's up to us to decide what Blackness means for us. And from the research I've seen, from the practice, from seeing so many people heal, it's clear that we're much more than just the physical reality that we find ourselves in. That we are, that we're beautiful human beings, that we're precious, we're valuable human beings. And when we have a proper context that allows for us to get in touch with that, then there's no limit to what we can actually achieve.
That's dope. I like that. Now, go a little bit more in depth to when you talk about us defining ourselves. How do we, for someone who doesn't know, how do we start that process?
Well, first is that I recommend that we stop watching slave movies. I don't think that they help us. I don't think that any movie that's going to be saying that the way how Black people began is only when they encountered white people. Our idea of Blackness is much more, it starts before the 1600s. It starts before the 1500s. You gotta go even way back. Mitochondrial Eve, the first DNA mother of our species, she existed about 200,000 years ago. And many scientists are there's general consensus that we came from Africa. And so that means that all people come from that individual on some level. We're all relatives on some level, on some shape or form. And I do think that if we're going to deal with the issue of racial trauma, then we have to understand that trauma is a memory-based issue. So that something happened in the past and it blocks you from being able to relive the past in the proper way, and also prevents you from being present. So we have to overcome that racial trauma of the 400 years of terrorism that happened to our people, and know that we are much greater than even that. And it doesn't even need to be famous people. Sometimes when you ask people about their past, they want to think that they're related to kings and queens and all of that. It doesn't need to be that we are great because other people saw us as great. I think that we're great because of the fact that we're still here. I think the fact that there's someone in our past, an unknown ancestor who survived the atrocities, who survived the difficulties that happened in the past. I think that's what makes us great. So everyone's path is completely different. But what I found is that when a person is able to say that they love themselves because they exist, rather than what they've done, or what other people say they've done, or rather they've done an Oscar award or an Emmy or any of that stuff, then I think that we move towards proper healing. You're beautiful because you're Black. You're Black because you're beautiful. It's not because you've done something, it's the fact that you're here.
Dope. I like that a lot. And me and Lady Bounce, we always talk about why is it that we receive so many slave movies or civil rights movies. Like the only movies we get is slave movies and civil rights movies. Nothing besides that. I would think like in the 90s we may have started getting a different variety of stuff. A real great movie. And during that era you had a lot of different movies. Malcolm X, Jungle Fever, School Day. Right. You had a whole bed of Black movies, Love Jones. But now all we get is civil rights, slave movies, or ghetto movies.
Yeah, it's intentional.
That's it.
It's by design. In the book Black Meditation, I talk about the binary complex trauma cycle. And in the book that came before it, which is called Anti-Racist Psychotherapy, Confronting Systemic Racism and Healing Racial Trauma, that's where I explained the neurobiological reasons for why racism impacts Black people differently than white people. And also that I explain why an anti-Black racism needs to exist. It's because the thing is that many times when we're going to talk about these slave movies that are so popular that I guess every Black person wants to watch them. I don't know why they keep coming out, but the thing is that maybe it's because white people want to watch it, and it makes sense because the thing is that what it does is it makes it so that Black people are frozen in history. It makes it so that Martin Luther King doesn't leave the Million Man March. It makes it so that Rosa Parks is in that one place. It's just that if it is that we are able to see that we are much more than just these snapshots of in history, then it opens up the possibility that maybe the narratives that we've been repeating over this time are not the only reality that's there. If it is that we are able to envision ourselves as being something greater, then maybe it is that Black suffering is maybe just a convenient story we've been telling ourselves over time. So the binary complex trauma cycle is to say that there's white supremacy and Black suffering that interact with each other. Many times when you hear people talking about racism, they only want to talk about the terrible thing that Black people are experiencing. And that makes it so that we don't get to focus so much on how whiteness benefits from it. So if you are talking about suffering towards one person, you have to talk about why the offender causes the person to suffer in the first place, or else you have an incomplete statement. If we're only talking about violence against women, we have to think too, why is it that men do this? If we take men out of the picture, then we are unable to stop the violence from taking place in the first place. So it's the same thing. It's just that anytime when we're talking about violence towards one group, we have to find out what is it in the social order, what is it in the economic, what is it in the from all aspects, economic, social, mental, physical, spiritual, what is it that prompts this violence to take place in the first place? So we're going to see slave movies, but we'll never see the movie that says why the white racist person stole people from Africa in the first place. They don't keep making those movies because then they have to get in touch with the idea that trauma is in the white body, and that's scary. So instead, it's Black people that are associated with trauma. It's Black people that are associated that are the worst people, because if they are to start to reflect and be like, well, why did we cause such intense pain and suffering towards these individuals? Then we will get a broader story. We will maybe get closer to the truth. Is that white racism or anti-Black racism exists as a problem within white people? It's not the problem of Black people. It's a problem of white people that just tends to impact Black people. That would require healing on their end. That's scary. No one really wants to go see a therapist. It's scary to go see a therapist. The thing is, you have to tell the truth. You gotta also talk about your wounds. So we won't talk about the trauma of white people. You know, the witch burnings, the executions, the guillotine. You know how many torture devices existed in Europe? It's a scary place. How many plagues and all these things? So the thing is that we don't really want to talk too much about rehashing the past in terms of white people suffering. So it's very convenient that we focus on Black people suffering so we can dissociate from the idea and the possibility that white people, that their pain comes from somewhere. Black people are here for entertainment. Gotta play basketball, throw a football.
Shut up and dribble.
Yeah, we can't kneel. Can't kneel. If you kneel, if you show that you're Black, this is dangerous. This makes us need to think. This is scary to think. So it takes all of us do have fear, but it takes courage to go and see a therapist. If you go and see a therapist, then you got to admit that there's pain. And so rather than that, we stick with familiarity. It's very comfortable. I know that you might have asked the question. You're just going to have to know that I'm going to give 10-minute answers for each of these.
Hey, it's all good. It's all good.
That is wonderful. So as you were talking, one of the things that I was reminded of listening to you and Pickett both talk was that here on our local CBS affiliate, the day after Juneteenth became this big, massive, wonderful holiday for us to celebrate, their Sunday night movie was Selma, Lord Selma. And I was like, wow, what a great reminder for us to stay in our place. Like,
there we go.
We acknowledge, that you guys have been through something. We don't know exactly what, it's made up, but you guys have been through something. But then here's this movie to remind you ain't really made it that far. It was crazy. And I put that on Facebook. And of course, I had some people that was like, yeah, I didn't even think about it that way. How did you notice that? And like, why didn't you pick up on that? So as we're talking about trauma and PTSD, can you explain to us or talk to us a little bit about the difference between PTSD and complex PTSD. Like, what's the big difference between them?
Sure. So the thing is that many times, I'll speak a little bit about the approach that I use. So the approach that I use is called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And in shortest way of that you might see it online is called EMDR. And the general idea is that we're able to use our mind to calm the body, and we're able to use our body to calm the mind. These are very important aspects for people to understand. A lot of times people see their healing as outside of themselves. But when we are trying to reprocess the suffering that has taken place, we are trying to activate the resources that are within the individual to counteract the strength and the power of the trauma that has impacted the individual. So when we are able to have sufficient resources, whether it's internal or external, then we are able to find a way of defending against these terrible oppressions, whether they're external or internal. So when we're talking about PTSD, the example I like to use is the example of a soldier. So the thing is, the soldier, he goes off to war. When the soldier comes back, he starts to respond with this hypervigilance. He doesn't feel safe. When there's a loud sound that goes off, he may dive underneath a table. He may pack heat in a way just to protect himself. And all of this makes a lot of sense in the context of him being in the war zone. But the problem is that now he's back home, but he's still behaving not in a way that's irrational, but maybe in a way that is missing the original context. So his behaviors actually would make sense on a war zone. Like if he wasn't in the war zone, it makes sense to be wary of intruders, to make sure you have your guns and your weapons. But the thing is, when he's back home, he's stuck in that state. So something has happened to him that has led to a part of him, an emotional part of him being connected to the past. Complex PTSD is similar to PTSD, except that there are multiple somethings that may have happened, and also multiple things might have happened at key developmental periods. So this might have happened when a person was young. This might have happened when a person, even pre-verbal trauma. So when we are young, we don't have many resources. We need our parents for us to survive. We can't feed ourselves. We can't walk properly. We can't drive a car. All of this stuff. So the thing is that we need someone there to protect us. But when repeated traumas, repeated terrible things have happened to children, then it's like as if the sense of self is affected by multiple emotional parts. There's multiple things that have happened in the past that may trigger us. So it may be triggers based on relationships, maybe triggers based on loud noises. It may be a bunch of them. So complex PTSD is especially when it's multiple that have happened in the short, at key developmental periods, especially when a person's young, and especially when it's interpersonal trauma. The thing is that when interpersonal trauma takes place, there's a betrayal. When a child is harmed by a parent, it's almost like it's like the parent is the one who's supposed to protect you. So that's a different type of trauma than witnessing a terrible thing in the PTSD context. Complex PTSD context, then, it's going to cause a person to maybe dissociate from their experience and separate from their body in a way, shape, or form. And then dissociation is going to be difficulty being able to orient in time and space. Dissociation, too, is going to be this derealization, this depersonalization, and all this stuff. So it's just to say that complex PTSD is, as the name suggests, is a bit more complex than the regular PTSD. And the strange thing about it is that we've only started talking about PTSD and diagnosing it since the 1980s. So that means that the research is still relatively very new. And that's because, there's social reasons for that too, is that if we start to say that people going off to war has a physical and mental health cost, you might not want to go to war so much. So there's reasons for why certain things are not discussed. But if we only, because I'm also trained as a couple and family therapist, so if we only look at just the individual without looking at the relationships to the individual or the systems that maintain the suffering on the individual, we're only getting a third of the story. We're not getting not even half of the story. We always have to look at what's around the person rather than just the periphery.
Dope, dope. I like how you broke that down. Multiple things, especially in the developmental period of coming up,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that we see that a lot in our youth today. Um,
For real.
I always say that you know, back in the day, you would hear the elders say, "Oh, life isn't so bad. You should have seen it back in my day." But I always knew that I would not say that, you know, especially we both have kids ourselves now, both almost adults. I know that life is a lot harder and circumstances are a lot harder in today's time than me growing up in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I would never say to a kid is, you should have seen it back in my day.
Mm.
Like you said, we just started talking about PTSD in the 80s.
Yeah, man.
So thinking about the youth today and the different things they go through and the programming that they get, it's gotta be confusing, and that's gotta be adding trauma in their developmental years. When we were talking about movies, I was thinking about TV in general. We had a run of good black shows, the Cosby shows, Different World, which I always say that's one of the shows that made me want to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
Rock. Even when you look at like sitcoms like Martin and Living Single, they were successful black people. They all had careers. But now all you have is trauma and ghetto and drugs. That's the only programming that they're receiving now. And can you speak on how that affects us by just seeing that same programming?
Sure. Well, the thing is that what it does affect more than anything else is it lines the pockets of certain people who put profit.
Yes.
Makes a lot of money.
Yes.
The whole drugs, the whole gunshot, like this stuff is, and you know, the strange thing is that there's a mental health consequence to it. Is that because I'm Canadian, but the thing is, I watch American news because you guys' news is just more exciting. There's always something going on in the States. There's always something, and we just gotta make sure that there's not a civil war that's gonna happen. So that's the reason why I read the news regularly. And also it's because for Canadians, it's just more it's more convenient for us to look at someone else's backyard, because many Canadians are aware of the racism in the United States, but no one hears about the racism in Canada. That'd be too inconvenient. Canada's done some great PR, you know. Everyone thinks that, like, if you go to Canada, there's no racism. Maybe igloos. Well, that's the problem with the PR. That some people think that I live in ice all the time. I'm like, no. It's just pretty close to Vermont. It's the same climate. Anyways, I digress. The thing is that I think it's intentional. I think that there's a lot of people getting rich, a lot of people making a lot of money, and it's that there's always a thing called a white lash that takes place. Like anytime that there's like a racial justice movement, after a certain amount of time, there's going to be this like response. Like we saw it with what's it called, Black Wall Street, like the destruction of these towns in the United States. We also had some equivalent things where if it looks like a lot of economic progress and a lot of progress for Black people, then all of a sudden there's a race riot, and the race riot destroys or levels the town. We had a similar thing, I think it's Africville in Nova Scotia, is that there's Black people that are coming together and helping themselves, and people come and destroy it. And that's because like there's this fear that exists in the white body. And I've spoken about this in my books, and I've spoken about this at a presentation recently, but it's that if you've ever heard of a person named Resmaa Menakem, so he's an awesome therapist and a person who his approach relates to somatic abolitionism. So he's a Black person who works with mental health and also with the body. And so he's a person who inspired me to think about this idea. When the Europeans came to this country, they came to this country from a trauma perspective. They were fleeing something. There's many Europeans who came here because originally, around the time of colonization, it's better to be in this place than over there. And also is that if you came here, then you're getting away from maybe poverty or from some worse terrible things. So the thing is that there's a flight energy that takes place. But then when you come to this country, you see the indigenous man, you see the indigenous woman, and there's a fight energy that takes place. It's because there's this threat that they need to accumulate the land, they need to take as much land, they need to take as much resources as possible. So this led to the genocide of the indigenous, our indigenous brothers and sisters. And so the same type of thing is that they needed people who could work with the land. So they needed to take the black man from Africa, and they needed to put this fight energy into whipping and damaging the black person, forcing them to work so that they could generate and push the wheels of capitalism and the generation of wealth for white people, saying that the black man was worth less, but the black man was generating the worth of the white man. It's a very interesting psychological violent thing that would take place to us. So just to say that this type of process is what drives the white racist. The racism that exists in the white person is trauma informed. It is based off of a survival aspect. There is a deep fear in many white racists, and they've told us many times that there's a fear that they will be replaced. So the fear of being replaced means that you are not comfortable in your space or in where you're at. You believe someone will take your place. So in a way, there almost needs to be this, it's called homeostasis. It's like there needs to be this balance, that you need to restore balance. Anytime anything is going to go too far in one direction in terms of progress for black people, so you got to bring it right back. Because the thing is that many white people felt as if they shouldn't be in this country in the first place. That's why they needed the help of the indigenous people to be able to, like up north in like where I live, they needed the help of the indigenous people to survive in the winter. And the indigenous people helped them. They didn't think that they were under threat. They were just like, yo, you guys are humans, we're humans, let's just help each other. But the thing is that they needed to be able to like it was all about survival, all about like just getting as much as possible because there's never enough. So then that type of racial trauma, this injustice, this violence over generations and generations still exists even to this day. So then when you are seeing that black people are getting to know themselves, starting to think about, wait a second, like, like if I'm going to use the Black Panthers example or Malcolm X example and all these things, so like black people are coming together, they're starting to see themselves as one. This is dangerous. We don't even see ourselves as one because whiteness doesn't even exist. It's a social construction. So this is very scary. So then there needs to be like something to reestablish the balance. So when you're talking about the movies and the film and all that you're seeing right now, it's I think it's not by any accident. My mom, she used to say, because she's Jamaican, and well, I'm Jamaican and like I was raised in a Jamaican household, but she'd always say something like about how like it's almost as if black people are always on like for the clock hand, they're always at 12 o'clock. So it's like in a day, it always comes back to black people for some reason. And whenever the stories in the news come back to black people, it's usually a terrible thing. And it's just to remind us again that, oh, you guys are leveling up. Yo, George Floyd, yo, everyone's together. Yo, the whole world is protesting this stuff. All right, CRT. We don't like CRT. Yo, everyone's getting together. Yo, it's like everyone's one people. Yeah, we don't want to teach about black stuff anymore. This is white lash. It doesn't always need to be in bursts of destruction or bombing the citizens, like with Black Wall Street and other events that have taken place. In other ways, it's just the fact that black people become the face of suffering. So if we've had all this racial progress, well, the big stories that you're going to see are in the media now are just going to involve either black people getting killed or black people getting arrested. We got to bring it right back. Homeostasis. We got to bring it right back to slavery. Let's throw on another slave movie. Let's make another form of this. If I can just digress a little bit, is that it's interesting that they always go to these slave movies, but they never go to showing white people at that time. I think maybe because in 2021 or 2022, whenever it is, people will see this. I guess it's never cool to show like white people in like the pantaloons. You know those old like clothes that white people would wear, like the Europeans and all, that never looks cool. So they can't make a new movie of that. Like if they make a new movie of like, you know, with their hats and all this stuff, people will be like, yo, this isn't, and the way how they're talking, they're like, no, this isn't interesting. But for some reason they can do it with us. So again, it's that they want to keep us stuck in time. And so this is what, but I also do have to say, while it is challenging for a lot of young Black people, this is the most amount of connectivity we of a human species have ever had in our lives. We have never been able, like, yo, I'm talking to you guys like I don't need to be in your physical space. Okay, so just to know that even though it is that we are more separated than we've ever been, we're also more closer than we've ever been. This is the reason, this is the strength of the social justice protests that took place. I never thought that you'd see like Black Lives Matter in like Japan. Yo, people are protesting for Black people in a different country all at the same time, all at the same, yo, that's why it's like, it is true that it is harder in some respects, but for those of us who will adapt to technology, there is an advantage that can come from all of this. This is why I've had the blessing of being able to speak with the both of you. So, although it is challenging, there's ways. We just need to find ways of adapting.
Dope. I like that. Before we get out of here, I had one more question I want to ask you about Black meditation. Speak on Black meditation.
Yeah. What would you like to know about it?
Black meditation, is it separate from regular meditation? And if so, how?
Okay, well, the thing is, I can't spoil the whole book, though, but I'm going to give you the abridged version.
That's cool.
So the thing is that it's just, for me, so I'm a person who's always been interested in how people can heal. I've also been interested in the importance of Black people recognizing that there's a healer within them, that many of our traditions that our ancestors did keep with us through being through that terrible passage onto like to get here. We were healers. We are healers. Okay, is that many of the things we were not allowed to practice our languages or our dances or our traditions, because all of them are healing. Like all of them have a way of being able to center yourself. You can't, you know, don't speak this way, don't listen to this music. Like a lot of what was African for thousands of years before white people were even invented, before they even like came onto the scene. So for me, I was very interested in how we can redefine what our Blackness means for ourselves, individually speaking. And also just to connect us to a deeper past, just to move past this whole slavery movie idea and say that our ancestors actually were also people who practice yoga. There's there's Black people who it's just to say that Blackness is much greater than we actually think. It doesn't need to be confined into the small idea of the entertainer for white people, the rapper or the ball player or anything like that. We're much larger than that. And also is to say that meditation may also be much larger than what some Black people think. Some Black people may be like, yo, that's a white people thing. I don't do no meditation. And so the thing is, we have to know that meditation and the idea of it is much larger than we might have thought. Of course, the focused sitting with the discipline and the focus on the breath, as Piggott was saying at the beginning, 100% is that this is an aspect of mindfulness and meditation. But just to know that there are multiple openings for what's it called? There's multiple like introductions that people can take to go onto that route of meditation. So this book is just a compilation of different techniques and tools and strategies, including an awareness of the breath, including being able to write, expressing gratitude, connecting with energy. There's multiple ways that people can use in order to get to that idea of knowing that they are people that come from a long line of people who have been able to heal throughout the generations. So Black meditation, there's 10 different practices that are in there. The full title, Black Meditation, it says 10 practices for self-care, mindfulness, and self-determination, because I think Black people need to heal from the suffering that has taken place. I think also that we need to cultivate an aspect of mindfulness, which is an awareness of the present moment, so that we can properly reprocess the past and be in the rightful place to determine our future.
All right. So tell the people how they can get the book and how they can contact you.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you can go on archertherapy.com, and that's my website. You're going to see my explanation for my approach. You're going to see like the links for my books and all that stuff. It's also available on Amazon. But if you Google archertherapy.com, you're going to see that there's a list of the links for the Amazon books. Again, the name of the book, Anti-Racist Psychotherapy, Confronting Systemic Racism and Healing Racial Trauma, and Black Meditation, 10 Practices for Self-Care, Mindfulness, and Self-Determination. Throw that into your Google search and you're going to be able to find the books. You got an ebook, paperback, hardcover, all that stuff.
Great. And before we get out of here, we got to get into my favorite part of the show. Doom, 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 doom. Brain science.
So we'll do the brain science, but you skipped the vital question there, Pickett.
We'll wrap that up at the end.
You forgot.
I know.
The famous question.
I know. We'll do that at the end.
So we're talking about Black mental health awareness and why it's important.
Yes.
Mental health is integral to living a healthy, balanced life. According to the National Alliance of Mental Illness, 1 in 5 Americans experience mental health issues, which translates to roughly more than 40 million adults per year. So why is emotional health important? Emotional and mental health is important because it is a vital part of your life and it impacts your thoughts, your behaviors, and your emotions. Being healthy emotionally can promote productivity and effectiveness in activities like work, school, or caregiving. It plays an important part in the health of your relationship and allows you to adapt to changes in your life and cope with your day-to-day stresses. So, how can we improve our mental health every day? I'm glad you asked. We can do simple things such as exercising, eating a balanced and healthy meal, opening the door for other people in your life, taking a break when you need to, remembering something you are grateful for, and getting a good night's sleep. All of these things can be helpful in boosting your emotional health. If you find you cannot do these things on your own, reach out for help. You can reach out to other individuals that are in your peer circle, your family, your friends, not your good time girlfriend that you go clubbing with, but your girlfriend that's got her head on her shoulders that's going to give you that right advice. Not your homeboy that is down to smash all the chicks during the weekend, but your homeboy who is at home taking care of his wife and his kids and got his life together. You want to make sure you're reaching out to the right people for the right reasons. Those good time friends have their place, but when it comes to your mental health, you got to make sure you're really reaching out and leaning on the right people. As always, you can learn more about mental health. There are books, there are resources, there are blogs, there are podcasts such as ours. You can also take a mental health assessment. A lot of these assessments can be found online and they are free to take. If all else fails, talk to a professional. That is what they are there for. If you start to feel like your emotional health is starting to impact you, it may be time to reach out for extra support. There's a website called Doctor on Demand, and you can see a psychologist or a psychiatrist or find the personalized support that you need. Lastly, you can also learn more about taking care of your mental health by watching our show, other podcasts, and self-help books like the ones written by our special guest today.
So go ahead and ask that question that I missed, which is the big question.
The big question. So, Mr. Archer, with all the healing that you do and that you help others do, what do you do for self-care?
Oh, I mean, it is a big question. And again, it's everything that's in the book, but I can say one thing that I do recommend that helps me especially, because I'm the type of therapist that I practice what I prescribe. So anything that I'm going to tell people to do is because it does help me in some way, shape, or form. So I do think that breathing is helpful. I do think that being able to sit and to appreciate in the present moment is especially helpful. But when we feel as if there's too much that is on our minds, when we feel as if it's like it's hard for us to focus, we gotta, like, as you're saying, like, we gotta think about taking care of the kids, taking care of our relationship, stresses at work. Sometimes what does help is really just having a journal. And in that journal, you gotta do it old school, okay? You gotta get a book and you gotta get a pen, okay? Because you can probably try and type it, but I prefer to do it in the old school way. And so what happens is that when you're able to write down what it is that happened to you, you're gaining perspective. When you look at the book and you see that you have written this, it's no longer that it's attacking you in your mind. Instead, it's really something that you're able to see, that you're able to measure, that you're able to deal with, that you're able to change. And what happens after we write down our own narrative is then write down again all the things that are stressing you out, just kind of like a brain dump. Put everything in the brain on those pieces of paper. And then after, at the end, write 5 things that you're grateful for. All you got to do is write 5 things. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be, I'm grateful because I had food today. I'm grateful because there's a roof over my head. I'm grateful because the sun came up. It doesn't matter what it is. But what happens is after you are able to practice this over a set amount of time, you start to notice that expressing gratitude is a normal part of who you are. For all meditations, it does require, first, a set of discipline. It also requires you setting aside time for it. But as you are able to practice it, the brain starts to get used to it and becomes more efficient with it. You want to be able to practice gratitude in a time that is challenging like the one that we're in. We want to be able to practice checking in with ourselves when there's so much that's on our mind. And as we are able to practice being able to heal ourselves, it just increases the amount of compassion and gratitude we can share with others. As we recover, it is, I believe, part of our responsibility to help our communities to recover. And so the only thing that I do ask from anyone, if there is any benefit that you got from this presentation today, is just to practice what you prescribe, and also just to see what you can do to make someone else's life a little bit easier as well. And for anyone who's hearing this, just to know, regardless of where you're from, regardless of what happened to you in the past, just know that your life has value. I hope that this presentation can even just give one person extra hope to go on to continue with strength, with resilience, and just to one day get to that point that they've always dreamed of. That's about it.
Word up, word up. Well, we got to say thank you for being a part of our show today. I've learned a lot. I'm sure the people listening will learn a lot, and I'm sure the people will be contacting you. I got to have those books myself. They sound incredible. So I will be ordering those within the next few days. And once again, just thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for bringing a good lesson to the people, because that's what we try to do on our show, is give people simple steps that they can take to better themselves and live in a great light. And like you said, to share that light with other people. Mm-hmm. So if you want to give it up with us, for people that are out there, we're wherever you find your favorite podcast. We're on YouTube, Facebook, IG, Twitter, TikTok. That's Fly With Us Podcast. And once again, Mr. Archer, thank you for being with us. I'm your boy Picket Fence.
Sorry, I was like all involved. And I'm your girl, Lady Bounce. And we have to give a special shout out to the people, because we did win the contest of Dayton's Best Podcast for Dayton.com's poll. So we just got to put that out there.
Yeah,
thank you to everybody
nice.
who voted for us. Thank you to everybody who continues to fly with us. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful space to be in.
Word up.
Word up. So
we out of here.
Yeah, and we out.
Yep. Peace.
Yo, blessings. Peace, man.
Peace.
This podcast is bringing the art of conversation, self-love, self-care, mental health care and protection, life lessons, love lessons, and everything in between. I'm your girl, Lady Bounce.
And I am Picket Fence. Every week, we encourage you to be mindful and practice self-care. We also back it all up with brain science on each show. You can find us on Facebook for your daily self-care assignments or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.